when we were first captured, I was somewhat comforted by the fact that I was a female captive, because I thought, especially in that area of the world, that, there would be nothing but the utmost respect. I had heard about Yvonne Ridley and her experiences, and so I was able to comfort myself that, it won't be that bad for me, at least, because I'm a woman. But unfortunately, we were not prisoners of the Taliban or a religiously driven fundamentalist group. We were prisoners of the Haqqani network, which has a very different attitude. And what I actually saw was essentially the opposite, that there was less respect given for women and children, that there was almost an open hatred by many of them towards women and children, that they greatly resented providing any sort of comfort or security for me. They greatly resented and despised the children. And this was a very difficult thing for me to comprehend. Their treatment of women and children and their overt attitude towards them, both in the womb and after they were born. So that was one difficulty.
Do you remember the day or the second or the minute that you became a hostage?
I don't really remember much of that.
Interesting, okay.
That part, actually. It's sort of blocked out. Once we were prisoners, and early on I was separated from my husband, so I was on my own.
How long was that for?
Quite a while, quite a few months. And initially, I had felt security, but more and more it became clear that there wasn't really any respect afforded to me because I was a woman, or because I was heavily pregnant and then a new mother.
When you first had your baby in captivity, was your husband there, or were you still separated?
We were separated at that time. So, and my trying to comfort myself sort of morphed into incredible feeling of vulnerability and helplessness then. Just feeling, obviously, like, I'm a woman, and if they're not a people that respect women, then there's just a lot of things that can happen, and did happen. And when they did the unspeakable and killed my daughter martyr, I was initially...
Do you know how far along you were with her at that time?
I'm not entirely sure, but it was, second trimester for 5 months, something like that. And
How did they manage to do that?
it was through, it was chemically induced. So it was somewhat, it was without our knowledge because it was chemically induced in the food. But at the same time, I had a really bad feeling because they were very angry to discover that I was pregnant, and they were pretty open that I was not allowed to have any more children, that they would allow me the one that had been born by that point, but no more.
Interesting.
And so then when it happened and I lost my child, I knew. And even after that, when they found out that the abortion had happened, they were pretty open about the fact that they had done it on purpose, and that we were not to ever try again to have a child. And I would have to say that which predated the sexual assault on me, but that actually the forced abortion left me feeling much more violated and helpless than anything else that I've experienced in my life. That there's nothing nothing quite like watching the loss of a life that you can't do anything about, that you had looked forward so much to getting to know that child. But now, now you can't, and you don't have, and there's nothing you can do about it, and you know that somebody made that decision for you against your will. And that would have been the worst moment of all of captivity.
How did you manage to continue going on?
It was difficult, but largely I went on after that point because I told myself that we would find somebody to tell what had happened to, who would give us justice, who would stop these men. And that was our major focus then for pretty much the rest of imprisonment, but especially initially right after. At that point, we were being held in an abandoned compound. It was not abandoned because the captors were there, but it had been abandoned. And a lot of the Haqqani network was hiding in the same area. So there were a lot of strangers coming and going that we didn't recognize that were guards. And we...
Most of the day, where would you be?
Locked inside a single room. They never gave us any more than a single room, sometimes with an attached toilet, sometimes not.
What happened if there was no toilet? What do they expect you to do?
Knock on the door, and they'll let you, they'll bring you a bucket, or they'll let you go outside for just a minute for the toilet. But
in the open? Or
no,
okay.
No, like they would have something.
Okay, got it.
Set up right outside.
So you're in this room most of the time, and after this happens, and you learn that you lost the baby, what goes through your mind?
Anger, despair, sadness, a lot of things like that. And like I said, a concerted effort, was what kept me going, a concerted effort to try to tell somebody, somebody that was not one of the guards, not one of the people directly involved with us, that were directly involved in the murder.
It's interesting you call it a murder. Can you talk about why?
Because that's what it was. It was a life, and they took the life, and they took the life without any consent from myself, from anyone. So that would be the definition of murder. And so we had hidden a pen, and we would use, little scraps of paper to try to hand out messages saying we were in a compound, an abandoned compound that was out in the mountains, and a lot of other people in the network, but not in our group, were around that area at that time. They were all in hiding. But they were coming from compound to compound. So we were seeing a lot of strangers. And I don't know, some of them were Haqqani networks, some of them might have just been shepherds or locals. But there were a lot of people coming and going. So we would throw messages out the window, or, try to wave them over, or even I often would just start screaming about what had happened, which, and then the guards would come in with sticks and hit me in that, and I would have to stop.
What would you scream?
That there had been a murder, that they were murderers.
So that was
sometimes
really
I would scream that I wanted to talk to a commander, that there's been a murder, things like that. And I was always hoping, obviously, I was screaming it in English, but I was always hoping somebody would hear. And
did they hear?
I'm not sure at that particular point, although there was, before we left this area, the captors had to run from the area because there was a big helicopter attack from, I'm not sure which military force, but there was a big offensive against the Haqqani network there with helicopters and guns and explosions and all of that, and then they had to run. And I'd like to believe that that was related, but I have no idea.
And then did they just abandon everything and come back to get you guys? Like, how does I have no idea how this happens. So there's an offense, you're in this.
At the time of the offensive itself, no, they didn't move.
Okay.
I was, at the time I was separated from my husband. It was actually the day after the sexual assault.
Okay.
Because they had, because they knew that we were trying to tell strangers what they had done, they had taken my husband out of the room, and so so he was out of the room, and then they had sexually assaulted me as retaliation for my speaking out about the murder of the child. And, and they made it clear that it was for that reason and that they would do it again if we didn't stop. And
How long into your captivity was that?
a couple years in.
Okay.
So, but then it was actually just a day later that helicopters came and started pummeling them. And it was, 10 days, a couple weeks, something like that after that they all left the valley. Everybody just transferred to a new place. But
Before that sexual assault happened, was there any other indication that it might come to that? Were you worried about that as a female hostage?
there had been some more than friendly advances by the guards, but it had always been kept in check. So I was surprised that they stooped to that level. Especially, I was surprised that they stooped to that level without, with consent of their commanders. Was more what surprised me. I understood as a female prisoner, in pretty much any system in the world, it can happen that a guard will do that to you. But it was, like I said, it was as retaliation to punish me for trying to speak out about murder. And that was what surprised me, because I didn't think that their commanders would stoop to that.
I was going to ask you a few things about now in the moment. You had never been a mom outside captivity. What was the hardest thing to adjust to?
I'm not sure I would say that there was anything that was difficult to adjust to. It was actually a wonderful, so much more wonderful to have, other mothers that I can talk to, other children that they can play with and see, because they had never seen another child even other than their siblings, which is not normal for a child.
Yeah.
And then in terms of transitioning back to life here, what was the hardest part?
The only difficulty that I really found was initially just a feeling of being overwhelmed going out. So going from being locked in one room to going out to go to the grocery store or to go to the bank or to just walk around the city was very overwhelming at first. So I avoided it for a few weeks. But now I'm pretty much back to before.
And how was it for the kids? Because they've never been to a grocery store before and the bank, or do they still go? Or
Yeah.
Okay.
No, they go.
Okay.
Najeshi Jonah loves it. He is happiest when he's out walking.
Okay.
And he has adjusted marvelously and like he was born for it. And Dakwan Noah is a little bit more tentative and less active, so sometimes it gets to be too much for him, but they're adjusting to it very well.
And Grace?
She smiles all the time now. And when we were still in captivity, she was very little, so I can't really speak to the mental state of somebody so young, but she seemed very sad all the time. We commented that she was such a sad baby. But since we've come out, she's always happy, always smiling, just nothing phases her.
What did the kids know about what was happening while you guys were being held? Like, what do they understand?
Their understanding was that it was just very basic. Like, we didn't hide from them the fact that the guards were very dangerous, bad people. And we tried to make fearful things seem less terrifying by making games out of them, or giving them reassurances, acting like none of this is out of the ordinary, so that they wouldn't feel like it was so strange as it was, or that it was so dangerous or dire. But they were aware of that the situation was bad, and they were aware that they were prisoners, and that most people in the world aren't like that most people in the world have more freedoms than they did.
And when they got back, how did they understand how that changed?
They understood. They knew, because we would talk to them sometimes about, if we always called it no bandy, because bandy is Pashtun for prisoner.
Okay.
So that was kind of like, we tended to use bandy instead of prisoner. But they knew that if we were no bandy, then this would happen or that would happen. And so when we were no bandy, then they were very excited.
Okay. This is no bandy.
Yeah, this is no bandy.
Okay.
And everything since coming out is no bandy. That was just sort of a shift in their what dimension they were living in, went from bandy to no bandy.
Wow. And did they ask questions about any of that, or kind of like?
They reference it. They are aware of the difference. Like, they will, at least Najeshi Jonah will say, when we were bandy, we didn't have this, or now that we're no bandy, we can go here. So he does have an understanding of it.
What's it like for you to hear? Do you just think that's part of their life and their life experience, or is it hard to hear sometimes? That this is such a formative part of their experience.
I think it will make them stronger, is my hope. In the long run, I think it'll make them stronger.
What do you think, what frustrates you the most about the misconception that you think people may have about your experience through all this?
I'm frustrated that so much of what happened to us, people don't view as something that I did so much as something that I was forced to do.
Okay.
I wasn't forced to go to Afghanistan. Nobody dragged me there, any more than people dragged me to Guatemala, or people dragged me to St. Kitts, or people, nobody dragged me there. Nobody forced me to have children that I didn't want. I had children that I wanted very much. So that would be my major frustration. Uh-oh.
Hey, sweetie, you want more? I'm done.
She's done.